It's good to be another Brit here, partly so that you don't all think that Brits think like Matthew Paris. And it's an odd position to be in, perhaps some of you think, to have somebody from another nation coming along to you here and saying, effectively, please police me. Strange misquote of that wonderful thinker Engelbert Humperdinck. But it's not quite as masochistic as it sounds. When we talk about the world's policeman, a lot of people summon up the idea of force and that you have the right to do it because you're powerful. I don't think that is what the reason is, that America has the right to be and should continue to be, as it currently is, the world's policeman. It's not your force as a nation which I think allows you that right. It's America's virtues that allow it that right. It's the fact that when America goes into a country like Afghanistan or Iraq, you don't do the things which previous great powers did. That the moment, if anything, this is a failing, if anything, when you go into a country like Iraq, you don't say, how long can we stay here, but how soon can we get out? You want to dabble as little as possible in the world. I think that's a virtue. You know when you have to intervene, but you also know when you have to get out. But to clear up some of the mistakes from the other side, already, just because you're the world's policeman doesn't mean you don't have allies. It doesn't mean you don't have friends and others who will do the job, will join you in the job. America in the last few years, despite the caricature of her greatest enemies, is not the unilateral organization that a lot of people would portray her as being. Now, as my two colleagues and comrades on my side have already intimated to you, there are really only two reasons not to vote for the right side, if I may, in this motion. The first is that you think that the world does need a policeman, but that someone else can do it. Someone else will step up for the job. You heard quite a lot at the moment from people talking more, I think, in glee than sorrow about the rise of China, for instance. You can look in your papers any day and see what the rise of China would bring in its wake if you wanted them to police the world. Look at the athletes, for instance, going to the Olympics, attempting to be forbidden from speaking out about any Chinese abuses whilst they're there. You want a perpetual silencing like that across the globe? You don't see America trying to do that. You don't see America trying to silence her enemies. America is the only force I can think of which tolerates people standing up against it, shouting as loudly as possible, picketing its military institutions, and all this kind of thing permits that. Think of another world power that would permit that kind of thing, or another policeman that wouldn't object when people continued to rejoice in poking it in the eye. Who else might be on the horizon? You might see, there's a lot of talk, for instance, at the moment about Saudi Arabia. We have a lot of talk about that in Britain at the moment with our Archbishop of Canterbury, or soon to be promoted to the Grand Mufti of Canterbury, saying that he wouldn't mind Sharia law in Britain. I was sitting opposite a clerical goon 2 mornings ago in London who was explaining to me, Sheikh Suhaib Hassan, what the Sharia that he would like to bring to Britain would be, and that, yes, we should cut off hands, and we should stone women to death, because it would teach the others, and he hadn't seen any adultery in Saudi Arabia. And I pointed out you don't often actually see adultery happening, but you might get those kind of global systems if you wish it hard enough, if you wish hard enough for America to fall, for America to be poked in the eye. But what will you do? Who will sort out these problems? Who will sort out a problem like Iran, when you'll have years of talks and the only progress you'll really hear of is Iran getting closer and closer to its desired objectives of nuclear power? So that's the first reason why you would vote against this motion. The second is that you think that the world doesn't need a policeman, that we'll be just fine without one. This, ladies and gentlemen, is, I think, a terrible, terrible illusion. It's a siren call which has called across history to people. It called to the people of Athens 2.5 millennia ago when Demosthenes warned them of the threat from King Philip and said, you do have other people who will tell you, if you ignore this threat, you will save money and you'll be able to spend it on other things. But I know that if you listen to them, you will one day wake up and you'll realize how much this optimism cost you. You're in the same position today, ladies and gentlemen, as people have been throughout history, as the famous journalist who before the First World War wrote that war in Europe was now an impossibility because it was so economically unviable. Well, it turned out to be unviable for more reason than economics, and people did it anyway. You will not be able to live in a world in which no one acts as your policeman. And let me cite one example of where the virtue of American intervention, it's been cited already by Max Boot, is not only necessary but vital. And I'd cite the case of Kosovo. This might well come back again and again later. But when the concentration camps in Europe reopened in the 1990s in the Balkans, and when we saw an ethnic genocide, an ethnic cleansing from a third-rate tin-pot dictator, and the European governments couldn't stop it, who was it who had to step in?
1 minute.
It wasn't France. France provided us with a phalanx of lawyers and a leak. America provided us with 98% of the air power, and they stopped a genocide. That's no small achievement, ladies and gentlemen. Could go through all of the things which Ellen Lapson said of the problems that you have enforcing this. Nobody says that it's good being a world's policeman. Nobody says it's enjoyable. Nobody would want the job, other than people who you wouldn't want to have the job. And if Matthew Paris, it's always wary when somebody opens with compliments. Mr. Paris describes my cause, our side's cause. I think your cause is a doomed cause. If it were a doomed cause, ladies and gentlemen, if my cause were a doomed cause, it would mean that our cause as a civilization was a doomed cause. It is, I think, too early to try to give up like that. Thank you.
What on earth can this cop on the beat, this American cop on the beat, do in a place like either Afghanistan or Iraq?
Well, I'll tell you
other than stay there forever.
Sure. Well, I can tell you one thing it can do and has done straight away, which is that Afghanistan is no longer a base where there are open training camps where terrorists can train and come and attack cities like this one we're sitting in.
And the heroin
and that's I don't think that's a small achievement.
And the heroin business is booming.
I think that's a different
so
question.
With the cops out there, what's he doing?
Well, hang on, if you let me finish. Well, I thought it was one question. Look, as I say, it's no small thing to get the first thing done, the thing that was originally why America and her allies went into Afghanistan, which was to take out flagrant training camps of terrorists. And that job has been done. Now, it seems to me that the job of sorting out the Afghan economy is a separate one which the world community generally is involved in. But I think that's a different point. I don't know if you want to try to make me an apologist for the American administration or a spokesperson for them, but I'm not.
Well,
my own view, for what it's worth on it, is that the job of creating a viable, booming economy in Afghanistan is a quite different one. Now, this particular policeman went in and sorted out the problem. It doesn't also have to be the Social Services Department.
Ian Bremmer, you talk about...
I don't have any lack of questions for the other side, but the one I'd most like to ask is Ian Bremmer, who mentioned, my ears pricked up about the Pew polls, about what people across the globe think of America. And aside from the vaguely unpleasant side of anyone caring that much about how much they're liked, I wonder if you've seen the Pew polls about suicide bombing, people who are in favor of suicide bombing as a tactic. Across the Arab and Muslim world, particularly legitimizing in vast percentages the murder of Israelis. And whether you've seen the Pew polls that show the number of people across the Middle East and elsewhere, the huge numbers of people who think that, for instance, 9/11 was a conspiracy forced on the American people by their own government, by Mossad and all this sort of thing. Based on all this, do you think that this is all America's fault, or do you think other people have agency and the ability to cock up? Can I also add to that, there's a confusion going on at the moment here between policing and being an imperial power, which is going to, I think, cause problem at the voting, at least for this side, which is why I mention it. Being a world policeman in the definition that we're going on at the moment is quite different from being a world authoritarian. To go back to Ellen Lapson's definitions, when she said that the definition of policing would be enforcing the rules, setting the rules, and having monopoly on the use of force. America does enforce the rules. They tend not to be ones set by themselves. They tend to be set by all sorts of other organizations and nations and history. And America certainly doesn't have monopoly on the use of force, as, for instance, the intervention in Sierra Leone by my own country would demonstrate. But I would just tidy that up. Just because we're saying on this side that we would like America to be the world's policeman does not mean we're suggesting that it is like the British Empire was, or that it's like any other empire. I don't think it is an empire. Being a policeman is quite different. And quickly, there's a good quote here from Mr. Blair, our former Premier in Britain, I think on the important point to make, which is that just because you can't intervene everywhere doesn't mean you don't intervene anywhere. And before the Iraq War, Mr. Blair was asked by a journalist why he was going for this particular conflict, and he said, it's a very important phrase, and I absolutely agree with it. He said, I get fed up when people say to me, why not the Burmese lot? Why not Mugabe? He said, I don't because I can't, but when you can, you should.
I have a question over here. Actually, unfortunately, it's a very general question, which is I'm getting more and more confused as this discussion goes on what the difference is between policing the world and actually using the military to go to war. And the two seem to be discussed along with each other. And I think they're very different issues. So I don't know if anyone wants to
Who is
take
that question directed to? Which side?
I'll take it for the motion.
You already answered the question. Why don't you answer it?
Yeah, just to get back to this point, is that, I think that I can speak for people on the side when I say that again, that the policing issue doesn't, first of all, it does not have to be only military. I think that's fairly obvious, and even a member of the other side conceded America's role in operations like the post-tsunami operations a couple of years ago. I think that, as I say, this should be cleared up before you vote, that the issue, and I think I mentioned in my comments earlier, that the issue of, for instance, sustaining an operation, remaining in a country, and all these sort of things is not what we are talking about as policing. That policing operations are not only not welfare operations, as I mentioned earlier, but are also not imperialist operations, and not even operations which people might think of sustaining for the long term.
Douglas Murray.
Thank you. I'd like to start off by mentioning something Ellen Lapson said, that she said sometime earlier that the rest of the world is providing the actual police. One of the reasons why that may be the case is because you, as a nation, are the ones that are doing the heavy lifting. It's not hard for Canada or somebody to not be able to provide troops, but to be able to provide policemen. It's not hard for Germany to send legions of people to Afghanistan who won't fire a gun. You can find those people. Who are you going to call? This is the question that we should have in our minds. When something goes wrong, when a tsunami occurs, when a massive humanitarian catastrophe like that, when a rogue state emerges, when a failed state becomes an even more failed state, or a successful one starts to fail, who are you going to call? Is it going to be another nation state, or is it going to be the UN? Matthew Paris mentioned the UN. The idea of the UN policing the world is like saying that you just pick a cross-section of every household in New York and say that that house will do the policing, and that one and that one. In other words, an entirely random process, which will mean you'll get a certain amount of people who are fine, but you won't get the driven people, you won't get the people who are prepared to do the job, who are trained to do the job, who are financed to do the job. You'll get some people who can do it accidentally. You'll also get some bums and some lazy guys and some guys who are just wicked and others, and that's what the UN is composed of, is a whole group of people who you would give moral legitimacy for the simple fact that they're there. This comes back to this issue I raised earlier about America wanting to be liked. You can police the world, you can be the world's policeman, but you should not be. It looks extremely bad to look like you're desperately wanting to be loved by the rest of the world as well. You will be blamed when you're the world's most powerful nation. You will be blamed when you intervene, and you will be blamed when you don't. You will just have to put up with that. And when the other side says that the great should not be the enemy of the good, I don't think anyone on this side would be or has implied that it would be, but the great should certainly be the enemy of the bad.